Welcome to January, everyone. We made it to this month that's now post-holidays. We've kind of gotten through that rush. It's passed. So now what? That post-holiday haze, it can feel a little disorienting, a little like off kilter. Perhaps maybe everyone, I know I definitely feel uncertain with what to do with myself sometimes. The busyness kind of lingers in our systems, and maybe we're just kind of feeling a little hungover from it all.
Mm.
I'm Amanda. I'm a yoga therapist. I practice clinically, but also through the practice of um, mindfulness and mind-body connection, mind-body integration. So that's kind of the framework that I'm working from. And I would like to hear from each of you how you work through and introduce your work to the path. Patrick, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Patrick Bryant. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, as well as a mindfulness teacher and certified mindful outdoor guide, meaning I help people reconnect with nature, our natural habitat. And so much of that involves moving along with the seasons and finding natural rhythms rather than trying to force something that's just not going to fit, which I think is directly relevant to January and that holiday hangover and really embracing rest and not associating that with just quit. We don't have to quit. So I'm excited to talk about all that with you two today.
Nice,
Thanks.
Megan.
Yeah, I'm Megan. I'm a licensed professional counselor and also board certified art therapist. Also have quite a bit of training in journaling and using that in the creative process and helping people kind of reconnect with themselves and listen to themselves through creativity and journaling and kind of in tune to that inner world that we have. Yeah, excited to be here. This is a really important topic, and I think January is just a great time to dive into it. So, this month on the path, we're exploring the deeper meaning of rest. So, all about rest, what it is, what it isn't, how to do it. And yeah, just want to quick dive in, make sure we get everything covered. Just kind of starting with how do each of you define rest beyond sleep? I think oftentimes when we hear the word rest, we associate that with sleep, which isn't always the case, but would love to just kind of hear how we're defining rest.
I honestly, through my program, my master's program, I have a Master of Science in Yoga Therapy, and we practiced a lot of ways in regulating the nervous system and really finding rest in our inner body. And I truly, the way that we practiced it, and we can get into it a little bit more, um, until I learned how to do that, I wasn't sleeping. So my sleep was very not healthy. And it took me about 35 years to learn how to rest, which led to better, healthy sleep, and productive rest, meaning like, um, not checking out. And I'm sure we'll get into some of these other topics, but rest really for me was down regulating from any kind of anxiety or up regulating from any kind of like lower energy states or lower like depressive kind of states, and finding kind of a middle ground where I was really present in my life and not kind of taking these other avenues to like avoid or consume anything that was like filling a void, right? Is just kind of like going into that place of the void, if you will, finding presence, finding breath, finding just stillness. It's not an easy thing to do, but that's kind of what rest is to me, is really just taking those moments to pause, to rest, to be still, to recalibrate your whole system.
Mhm.
Yeah, for me, I really define rest personally as being still and quiet. Uh, it's an opportunity for me to regenerate, and I think that's something that has gotten a little bit confused in modern society. Not burning energy is not the same thing as recharging. We have so much access to things that just consume, and are placed on top of us, but we're still operating. We're still functioning at quite a high brain length, so wavelength. Yeah, I for me, it's slowing the wavelengths, being still, being quiet. And as Amanda said, it is a very simple thing. It is very much not easy, particularly when we are coming from states of hyper arousal, we're managing expectations, internal, external, where it's go, 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 get it done, the next thing. And to drown all that out, we have a screen or something else. I'm just as guilty as anyone of that, to just shut our minds down and make our bodies force us to sleep,
Mhm.
waking up the next day not feeling rested. So there's the difference between sleep and rest.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. And last month on the path talking about prioritizing and pacing, and so that we often kind of get into that busy go go go, and it can be hard to do that rest. And so I hear you both saying too that it's not rest isn't just the absence of an activity; it's the presence of nourishment, right? Having that being rejuvenating. And so how do you rest intentionally?
Oh yeah. So I see this as like making it so using that essence of prioritizing and saying this hour before bed, I am not going to be on any screens. I'm going to either journal or read or stare at the ceiling or do something. So intentionally kind of almost eliminating external stimulus to just be present. Maybe it's just breathing or taking that time to be intentional to wind down in order to move towards rest, especially coming from, like you said, Patrick, like states of hyper arousal and like a busy day. At the end of the busy day, you might just want to check out, but maybe mindfully moving into a space of stillness. Maybe it's a meditation practice. Maybe it's a going for a walk. Maybe it's just doing something that's like taking away some of that extra stuff and really prioritizing the space to wind down and to regulate.
Yeah. I would just add to that. What I caught in there is that's essentially meeting yourself where you are. Right?
Yeah.
It's really difficult to go from a really fast pace to just immediately slowing down and being quiet. We're going to resist that because it feels unsafe. It's too stark of a difference. Meet yourself where you are. If you're moving at a fast pace, I do it myself and I encourage my clients to do it. Just literally walk as fast as you feel yourself moving and then slowly bring that pace down. I think it's also important to assign meaning to it. Why are you doing the meditation? Why are you doing the walk? Why are you slowing down? What do you want to get out of this? So, it's kind of the zoom out, zoom in mentality of zooming out. Oh, the big picture, I want to feel better tomorrow. So I need to let tomorrow go right now. Come
Mm.
in, sleep, slow myself down so that I can do that rather than avoid and check out. That's a way to do it. It's not necessarily effective or sustainable. The
Mhm.
checking out part.
Yeah, Patrick, I love your note of like meeting ourselves where we're at, right? I think that's coming from a self-compassion point of view, and also that it's hard to just shift into rest when we're go, go, go. And so that like we need to meet us where we're at, right? Need to kind of match the energy level and then bring down. And that can be really useful for kids too. Oftentimes they're like, calm down, right? When they're like doing a lot. Where, like, hey, meet you where you're at with your body moving or kind of the stimulus that's happening. And then, okay, how do we slow? How do we slow? How do we slow? I think kids are a great way to see that process happen, but we need to do that for ourselves too. So helping us kind of shift those gears down. Um, but yeah, I want to kind of shift into, there's lots of different areas of rest, right? Mental, emotional, either sensory or creativity and social rest. But how can someone kind of recognize when they're depleted in those areas, when they're really needing that rest? How can someone kind of check in with themselves and notice that?
I can
Amanda? Yeah.
hop in. Yeah. For me personally, I have to again set that like that it's very embodied feeling. So if I'm being asked, invited to a social gathering and I'm immediately feeling myself close in or like get a little tense or a little apprehensive, like that's an obvious, like for me, no. Like that's like I should not accept that invitation because I'm already like starting to feel like overwhelmed by it and I'm not even in the social situation. I
Mhm.
think that is a definite sign of like, hey, you need some recharging time. And for me personally, again, a lot of recharging is a very solo experience, and I really need to like spend time with myself. Or maybe it's like I can go to a yoga class or some kind of or to a movie or something where I don't have to give out a lot of energy, but I can still be with people. So there's a negotiation that happens oftentimes. Um, Sensory for me, it's the same thing. It's a very much a body reaction. I feel myself tense up. I feel myself get a little like caught and like stuck feeling for whether I'm sensory, social environments, maybe even emotional stuff. That stuff comes up and I just get a little bit like rigid, and then I know that I need to like slow down and find some stillness and recharge. Maybe mentally for me, it's like my mind is just kind of racing, racing, racing. And I'm realizing that I'm thinking about a lot of stuff and none of it really matters.
Mhm.
So it's just like a constant like thinking machine. So when I'm there, I realize that I'm like maybe a little bit overwhelmed, or I'm like showing up, can't finish sentences. I'm just like brain fog. And that's a definite sign for me that I'm like, oh, I need to rest my mind a little bit. Um, yeah, I think a creative one is a little bit more of again, for me personally, is like a long-term thing. So I can recognize over periods of time, maybe months, maybe years, that I haven't expressed this creative energy that's in me. And there's usually like I feel like I'm being pulled to something, or there's something that really wants to come through, but there's a barrier of some sort. So when I feel that kind of disconnection from my creative energy or whatever you want to call it, that is definitely another sign where I need to like maybe do a creative engagement practice where I'm really just turning it on without having to think about it or without it having to be an outcome of something. Yeah, I think that's that's a kind of a thorough exploration of how I recognize it in myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, just to generalize that a little bit, I think people would notice that um, you're avoiding or it's a busyness, kind of a general thing that you were talking about across the different points there is, I notice when I'm busy, my brain's busy, my thoughts, my body's moving too quickly, rushing from thing to thing, or I'm avoidant. So two opposite ends of the spectrum. I'm all in, going too fast, or I'm just completely avoidant. It's a good sign for me that I'm doing too much or depleted.
Mm.
It might look like not wanting to go to work. There's lots of reasons people don't want to go to work, but this might be one of them. Particularly if it's something that you enjoy usually, and now you're just, I don't want to do this. That's a
Mm.
good thing to check in and maybe run through the different points that you talked about, Amanda. All right, is it in my body? Is it in my mind? Is it my creative parts of me that enjoy this but aren't enjoying it anymore? Maybe that's attached to mood as well. So
Mm.
yeah, I think it's just these are cues, right? These are cues, but then we got to do something with it. We just have to get the correct cue, understand what's actually happening before we start throwing solutions at it, which is what you were saying with the mindful awareness of it. Hey, what's really going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, for both of you. I think that what you're saying, yeah, that the avoidance piece, right? So if our behaviors start to shift, Amanda, you noted, right, like thoughts shifting or racing for you, and then also really in tune with, okay, how am I feeling, right? How does my body feel? How are my moods feeling? Yeah, kind of checking in with yourself on all those cues to see, how or when am I needing rest? Um, so I do want to hit on the misconceptions of rest. Curious of what you all see. I'm thinking there's definitely that idea, right, of that rest needs to be earned or justified. We kind of find all the things to do, and it's hard to give us time and space to rest. We often feel like we're not doing enough, or like, yeah, that we have to like earn that time of rest. So just kind of curious if you all want to speak to that specifically, or kind of any other misconceptions that you see about rest.
Yeah, I don't like the idea that like rest and I've definitely experienced this in myself sometimes, like it comes out as I feel like I'm being lazy. Or that if I'm taking this time off that um I'm not of value, or I'm like my productivity is like impacted. So it's a tough one because I think it is in all of us because of the way that we live our lives, and we're in a society we have to go, 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 like we've mentioned before. Um, and then when we do take that time off, like even sometimes like taking a vacation, most people are really much like so much looking forward to taking that vacation, but then there's like this little like background voice of like guilt, like, oh, I should have finished this before I went, or I should have done this. And it's a lot of shoulds, and I don't love that. Um, yeah, I think that it's seen as lazy, as non unproductive, and then even using the term I heard myself earlier say productive rest, and that even feels a little icky. So there's just like sometimes like a little ick that comes up with this topic. Maybe you can speak a little bit more to that, Patrick.
Yeah, I think it comes down into identity, right? I mean, those early agreements or rules that slip into our rule book, maybe we aren't even sure that they're there or why they're there or how they got there. But I think for most of us, at least in this contemporary society, we're brought up of instant gratification. We've created all this wonderful technology to make our lives easier, and the reward we got for that was making it more complicated. We fill it with more stuff. So I think that's kind of part of this really complicated system. Is I would encourage folks to you really be curious about the rule. Why do I believe this? Where did that come from? This being I have to earn my right to rest. Um, I think there's also this kind of false altruism that gets passed around of I need to do for others, sometimes to the extreme of being a martyr, constantly sacrificing ourselves in order for the good of others. I think it's the old adage of it's a little bit harsh, but what good are you if you're empty?
Mm.
So I think that's from a self-compassion model. I know it's from a self-compassion model of we have to be honest with ourselves about what we can offer before we overextend, because what we overextend only depletes us and leads to other emotions like resentment or disappointment. But I
Yeah.
think that's part of all this complexity of misconception is that we have to earn it. We have to build up for it, almost like it's a savings account. I think it's more about just checking in with yourself and do I need it? Okay, how do I make this happen? And it doesn't have to be forever, like you said. I mean, it doesn't have to be 8 hours of sleep. There are studies that show that 15 minutes of mindfulness meditation can be equivalent to an hour's worth of extra sleep.
Mm.
That's a pretty big return. It's not to say that you do 30 minutes of meditation and you get 2 hours of sleep. It's not an exact exchange. It's just okay. What do I need? You slow down, get the nervous system calm down, and then move in to whatever I've got to do if that's what's required.
Mm. Yeah, and I think you all kind of answered my next question too, of just kind of why is it hard to choose rest even though we know we need it, right? Like you were saying, those messages we give ourselves, kind of things in our culture or personally that get in the way, or kind of feeling selfish. But I think too with rest, if we kind of reframe our thought around it and we shift rest being a luxury, like, right, I take time to rest instead of that being selfish, or something we have to earn. If we reframe that to something we need, it's something we have to do, and so it's rest in itself, even if it's I'm not really doing a lot, like that in itself is important, right? Like that is productive, Amanda, to kind of that like productive rest of
Right.
I'm taking that time, like this is a productive activity. Oftentimes we see it as like something we don't need or something we kind of push off our plate because there's other things to do. But if we shift that in our mind of like, I need this, right? I have to have this. It's important for me. And so making that space for it, I think, can kind of help us kind of give ourselves permission to do that.
Again,
Um,
I love metaphors. So last time we talked about the overloading on a circuit, like an electrical
mhm.
circuit, and I think a good metaphor here or analogy is, considering a battery. You know, we don't need to throw ourselves away. We are rechargeable batteries.
Mhm.
So no matter how much we want to get something done, if that battery is dead, it's not happening. We have to recharge it. So what you said, Megan, just made me think of this. If yeah, shifting the mindset from a luxury to a necessity, I think we're also quick to think we're going to get thrown away. We're going to get thrown out. We're useless. We're a dead battery. No, we're a depleted battery. We just need to be recharged.
Mm.
Just tossing that out there.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that. And last month on the path, right, the mindful making was looking at things that give us energy and things that drain, right? Those gains and drains, and kind of noting for yourself where those are. And I think those can be good points to come back to of how do I rest in there? How do I use some of those things that give me energy to also kind of supply that time of rest?
Mhm.
But okay, so I want to shift into kind of a different section of this that I think is really valuable, of how do we kind of distinguish between healthy rest and avoidance? We talked about it before, right? That sometimes we get into avoidance rather than having that restorative or healthy rest. But how do we tell the difference between those two? When is it checking out and avoidance, or when is it actually rest?
Yeah, I think this is such a good topic to talk about because guilty is charged of like doom scrolling on my phone for hours and not realizing that hours went by and then being so exhausted and getting in bed and not able to sleep. So I think there's something that happens oftentimes when we're really stressed and we're kind of overloaded our system and our load is just like too high. So our cortisol levels are high and our inner pharmacy is just imbalanced to the point where we are exhausted, but we can't rest. So there's this like, I'm so tired, I can't even think intentionally of how I want to rest. So I just am going to check out. I'm going to watch TV. I'm going to look at my phone. I'm going to do something, and it's going to take hours of my day away. And not to say that those things can't be helpful. Sometimes, like watching your favorite TV show or your a movie is a comfort, right? So that can be a great thing to do. It's just kind of being intentional about it, being mindful about what's going to be helpful for me right now, today. That's going to promote like a future me's life, right? So what's going to be helpful for tomorrow, me, but right now is what I'm looking at. And um, it's like that intentionally, like for me, putting my screens away for at least an hour before bed and really using that time to just be quiet and to let all of the sensations and the sensory activity kind of like down regulate so that I can move into a more restful state. That's I think what's healthy rest for me versus the avoidance of like I'll scroll on my phone, fall asleep on the couch, wake up at 2 a.m. and then have to like go back to beds, and that's really disruptive, right? So it's just like kind of being intentional about setting yourself up um for that, and then noticing when you're stressed or really burnt out and you want to just like numb, and say, okay, the how can I set myself up to go into that place what I really want without just like immediately opening the phone or immediately turning on the TV. It's like maybe I go wash my face and get ready for bed, and then I can watch like one episode and then do whatever. So it's just, again, shifting it a little bit. Um, yeah, I don't, maybe you have more to say about it, Patrick.
Yeah, no, I mean, this comes up a lot. Consultations with therapy sessions, talks. I just hear it so much. So it's a common thing that we're often experiencing. And what you said about the doom scrolling, I think that's your big cue. If you're spending an hour looking for something to be entertaining, that's a pretty good cue that you're looking for something that you're not getting.
Yeah.
And the one of the bigger obstacles I hear people talk about is that they're so busy. The only time they have for entertainment is when they need to be resting. So what that says to me in my mind is that they're now prioritizing entertainment over rest when it's in a time where they need the rest. And I get that. I honestly, I hear that. I'm guilty of it too. But I think that's a good indication that there's something askew with the larger system.
Hmm.
If you don't have time to do anything that brings you joy, except during the time that we need to be resting, I think that's a really good cue. Be curious. Don't judge yourself or beat yourself up about it. But just notice, maybe there are more things, more steps in the system that need to be altered or adjusted, because that just lends itself to the myth of, being conflated between healthy and unhealthy rest.
I think there's also like a piece in that um, we can use the previous talk about prioritizing, and like if we know we're overloaded, we know we're stressed, we know we're lacking time and connection and whatever we want to feel, it's taking those cues and being intentional about how we're spending our time, even if it is limited. Um, and like I think there's a popular term, it's like sleep procrastination. Very
Mhm.
guilty of that. It's like I will
Mhm.
just like do whatever I need to do to like steal back my time, but then
Yeah.
it's also like impacting how I'm going to be able to show up in the future, right? So it's just recognizing that fluctuation.
Mhm. Yeah. So I think the main takeaway from all that I'm hearing is being intentional, right? Kind of we often automatically go to things when we feel like we have that space of rest or want that rest, but being intentional in what we're choosing and how we're doing it. And I think too, like giving ourselves maybe bringing that lens of curiosity of how do we feel after these things, and maybe checking in of, okay, I just scrolled for 10 minutes or 3 hours, but how do I feel after? Kind of in tune with how does that activity make me feel, as opposed to crafting or something, right? Of yeah, kind of using ourselves as a little experiment of how does this feel after doing it, which also makes me think of kind of that mental quietness, or maybe we can call it boredom, when we have those spaces of quiet. This is my guilty. It's like a little bit slow, and I automatically grab my phone. There's nothing on it I need to check. There's nothing on it I need to see. It's just kind of at this point become an automatic habit that I'm working on. But kind of, when especially the season, right, is calling us to kind of more stillness and quiet. um I don't know, just kind of curious of thoughts on why we're so uncomfortable with that mental quiet or boredom, and how do you all encourage people to kind of normalize that it's okay to do less and be bored.
This is one of my favorite topics. I love it.
Me too.
Um,
Go for it.
Mainly because I experience it myself, but also just because of, the couple decades of training and personal practice, I've just learned so much about um, both my natural resistance to boredom, and because it's uncomfortable, it's supposed to be uncomfortable, and my need for it. I noticed we talked earlier about those creative exhaustions when, the writer's block or whatever, being a good cue that we need rest. Well, there's so much research. Michael Easter talks a lot about the research in his book, The Comfort Crisis, about um, we need those creative parts of our brain to be activated in order to effectively solve problems, but also to rest, to give our brains a break. In kids shows, they call them brain breaks, which is really fun. And it's just silly. It's supposed to be silly. Just, we don't need to be productive. Play is intentionally unproductive. So I think that's something that brings my attention, is when we can sit through it, we also build our tolerance for discomfort. And you asked, what are some of the things getting in the way? Again, I think it's a lot of the technology that was well intended, that we wanted to make our lives easier and keep ourselves happy. It's not working, because it's just too accessible to never have to turn off. We don't have to be uncomfortable. So we lose our tolerance for it, and we go more into things like anxiety, anger, disappointment, busyness, perfectionism. We experience all of that as a result of not allowing ourselves to be still and bored.
Yeah, I
I could
think to
go on a
that.
lot longer, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, I
Another
think
day.
exactly. I think to that point, it's like we've eliminated boredom to avoid being uncomfortable. So we have it's just how you were talking about before, and it's definitely on a like society level and world level. But there's also a Harvard professor and author Arthur Brooks who talks about needing to be bored so we have time to and space to like think big and to kind of uncover those bigger questions in life, like what do our lives mean? Like, what's the meaning of and in our lives? What's our purpose here? And when we give ourselves that space and time to be bored, that's when big ideas come through and big insights and inspiration. And, that's like, imagine before the internet, before screens, what people were doing. They were inventing things, they were creating, building, crafting, and failing a lot and still doing it's like a really astronomical number of times that Thomas Edison had to like create the light bulb before it actually worked, right? Or something like that. There's like big number. And so it's like giving ourselves that time and space to really tap into those like bigger questions, those creative things. But we have to like stick to it, commit to it to be uncomfortable, get through the uncomfortable part, widen our window of tolerance instead of like just go to the quickest avoidance mechanism.
Yeah, yeah. So bringing back that theme of being intentional, right? And noticing like, okay, what am I doing that's maybe not working, and how do I choose something else? And yeah, I love that, like getting more comfortable with the uncomfortable. Nothing with that is unsafe. It's just not what we're used to. So yeah, giving us some time. And I love your note, Amanda, that you had, right? I think creativity kind of lives in that quiet space, or it can live in that quiet space of kind of sparking out like, oh, what if, or I'm noticing this, and kind of just yeah, having that creativity. All right. So we're starting to wrap up here, and we kind of want to check in. Basically, kind of if listeners take away one main idea for this month of rest, or if you want them to kind of have one reminder about rest, or maybe a little tip that you have about where they can start if rest feels impossible. I realize that's lots of questions in one, but just kind of what is something kind of you'd like people to remember to take with them as we move into this month?
I really I stand on a soapbox on this topic, but I really would love to like impart this idea that two things can be true. So
Mhm.
you can I think especially with a topic such as rest and like that productivity, the avoidance, the busyness, the this, that there's so many things going on. And yes, you could have a to-do list years long. Um, and none of that stuff will ever be meaningful if you don't take the time to like to rest. So being able to hold both your rest and your need to be a part of the society equally, and that also goes along with what we were just talking about is like being okay with being a little bit uncomfortable, because when you break through that like discomfort, it might still be there. There's still going to be things buzzing around, but when you find comfort, oh my gosh, what it does for your system, your whole body, your every aspect of your humanness benefits from taking those maybe it's 2 minutes, maybe it's an hour, maybe it's 2 weeks, like whatever you have, whatever you can commit to and prioritize in the especially during these next couple of months, maybe just like taking a break from social media for a month, see what happens, and just being really again intentional and mindful about it's okay to be uncomfortable because there's also going to be comfort. You can hold both things.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And I would just add, it's as we are, in this new year, a lot of pressure to be a new you, a new person, different person. I would just say, why? Why do you need to be different or new you? Because as we were talking about earlier, a big takeaway for me is just meet yourself where you are and take small steps to get where you want to be. And as you were saying, Amanda, two things being true, it's that paradox of um, I am a busy person. I have a very busy life, and I also need rest. This addresses all the myths, right? There's so many myths about productivity, one of the most popular is multitasking. There is no neuroscientific evidence to support multitasking. In fact, it's the complete opposite. Yet we still prescribe it and we still subscribe to it. So I think meet yourself where you are, slow down. These are not compartmentalized ideas. It's not either we rest or we're productive. They're both. Think of it like a Venn diagram. We need both, and the overlap of rest and engagement, goal-based functioning, it's thriving. That's what that middle ground is. So if we want that, we need both.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's my kind of takeaway that, yeah, I would like to remember both of you saying this, right? Of that rest is productive. And so if we can kind of hold that in our mind, that that can be beneficial. And I think too, maybe finding for ourselves or kind of making a commitment to how am I going to prioritize rest or how am I going to kind of add this into my life and kind of making intentional choices there. I think before bedtime is a great place to start. We kind of naturally, right, associate with rest with sleep, although we just talked about how those are not necessarily the same thing. But kind of having, you know, even if you allow yourself 10 minutes, kind of before sleep time of how can I include some rest there, right? Maybe dimming lights, listening to some music, where I'm journaling, you know, some light stretching, something that feels I don't know, just kind of restful in those few moments. Maybe it can help sleep, maybe it doesn't shift sleep, but I think kind of giving yourself a time and space to intentionally choose a restful moment is really beneficial.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a restful January, and we'll see you on the path.